Well, welcome everyone to a Legacent, the podcast. I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am your host, and it is great to be here with you on podcast number one of the Legacent. I have been thinking about creating it and bringing it forward because over the years, I've certainly recognized that there's a lot of call for what can we do after 60. And I said, well, let's take a look at something because one of the things that I recognized for decades, you've gathered experiences, learned lessons, solved problems, leveraged appreciations, overcome challenges, and contributed to others, have you not? And yet, after 60, and this has popped up quite a few times now, questions that are being asked of me is what now? And some people might say, well, so what? What else? But what now? They're a little confused or they're seeking, they're curious, they're trying to figure out what's going on. And so instead of this what now question, what would happen if you were to ask, what if the question is not about figuring out relevance, which is where people get stuck often, rather, it's structuring your contribution. What it means is that you're attempting to figure out, okay, of what I have, instead of thinking about what's relevant, what could I do to structure some contribution? And that's why curation is one of the topics that I'll be bringing up is figuring out of what it is that you've got, what is it you can do with it. And so for me, one of those was around the sense of this Legacent podcast. And being a one person show, I can do it by myself, but often I'm going to be inviting guests. And today I have a guest that will be joining us. But just before we do that, let me just emphasize something here that I think is really important. And that is that I have four words that I want to bring forth today: Legacent, identity, mentoring, and impact. And this notion of Legacent is important because obviously the podcast is called Legacent, but at the same time, it's a new term I coined, I'm bringing in. Now, I say I coined it. I've done some research and I can't find anyone else who's using it in the same way I am. There is someone who has gotten legacent.com. I attempted to get it. It's not going to come my way just yet. You never know. And someone in Asia used the word Legacent in some copy that they wrote. But really, no one else has grabbed a hold of this word Legacent. And for me, Legacent is about, ent is about being legacy. So if you're being legacy, in other words, you're living the legacy you intend to leave, you could become a Legacent. But if we add on to that, this sense of then being willing to gift your time, effort, and money so others can learn from you, then you're interacting with others. And the beautiful thing about Legacent is that by interacting with others, sharing those adventures, what you can do is you can create something that neither of you could do individually. And that's that holistic, evolutionary way of looking at it. One of the words that's really popping into this now is being regenerative or generative. And again, we're going to play with those words on one of the podcasts here soon. But this sense of a Legacent, that's where we're going with what's taking place today. And with the guests that I have, we're going to be unfolding these words a little bit more. And so, just before I bring them on, let's just take a look at a deeper understanding of Legacent. So, Legacent is someone who's turned their life experience into something other people can actually use while they're still here to see it happen. living your legacy. So a person who's living their legacy forward instead of waiting to leave it behind. And if this, I'll see this point over and over and over again on the podcast, is that often people link legacy to something that is going to happen later in their transition. And the idea here is, what am I doing right now that someone else will still be living from long after this conversation ends? That's you thinking about it. And that's why I wanted to invite Doug into the mix, because he is someone that I'm interacting with on a great level. And he has something to say about Legacent. I believe he's understanding his identity. He sure has got mentoring down and this sense of impact. And I'm going to ask Doug to introduce himself. Then I've got some questions I want to ask him. So get into that little give and take. And then we have a special announcement. Doug knows about it, so it's not like a complete shock to him, but something to celebrate. And this is the first time we're making it known, which I think would be great. And it links into then how he takes mentoring into impact. And that's a wonderful story. And then we'll close up. I just want to introduce you to the Legacent magazine just quickly, because there'll be links down below. But I also want to encourage you is, if you have a sense of some questions or anything like that that you want to ask, you can put it into the comments section, and I'll jump in there and we'll bring them out forward. And if it requires us to come online with us, I hope you're okay with that, because then we can really have some fun with it. So, Doug, I have you here. Why don't you share just a little bit about who you are and where you are and what's going on?
I so I'm Doug Lawrence, and I'm an international certified mentor slash grief mentor. So I'm working in the grief space, using mentoring as a means to be able to do so. I'm an international best-selling author as well. I have accumulated probably about 3,400 hours of mentoring in through my practice and stuff like that. So that's that's without getting into a long-winded spiel about that, I think is sufficient for now.
Okay. So, how long have you been mentoring for?
Since 1992.
Okay. And what got you into mentoring in 1992 versus some other kind of educational approach?
I was job coaching university students, and the relationship went from a job coaching to actually to mentoring. I didn't know that that's what I was doing at the time, but I did some research and found that there's a place for this thing called mentoring. And once I understood what it is, I also knew or saw as a result of my research that there was also a place for mentor training and mentor certification. And so I established a relationship back then with a company in the US to create a certification. And then fast forward to where you and I, our relationship was, we just continued that journey of creating and maintaining and nurturing and feeding a certification process that was going to answer what my research had identified.
And so that's called the International Mentoring Community for everyone else. And on YouTube, we have the channel Mentor Practices, and that's the front, the International Mentoring Community, where you'll find videos. But I also want to acknowledge is that Doug and I took a little bit of a step back from going at it and really bringing it forward, because we both had some things that we had to deal with. Yet at the same time, Doug continued to do very active mentoring. Correct, Doug?
Correct.
Yeah. I backed off quite a bit because I was going into this identity, figuring some things out, had some ups and downs that went with that. And I just asked Doug, can we just go on hold with the international mentoring community for a little bit? But now I think it's time to really bring it forward. And it's because of something that Doug mentioned. And I want to acknowledge that, which is around the sense of grief. Because in the story of identity, for those after 60, there is, okay, well, I was in my career, I had this title or I had that title, or I knew I was doing this, I got involved with that project, whatever. And now they're going through that transition and maybe on the other side, or they're noticing it because maybe they're told, oh, well, we don't need you front up, maybe you can do something to the side. And eventually we know you're going to retire, use that kind of word. And there is a feeling underneath that, all right, around grief. Would you? Yeah. And so when you talk about grief mentor, Doug, what does that mean? So that I think it's a new term in itself as well. And what are you attempting to get at that is about grief? And it can be linked to this notion of that transition into 50. And therefore, grief mentoring, understanding it may actually be something to help you with your identity.
That's a good point. I what I've noticed that's taken place is that there's a need for a grief mentor, and that by definition is somebody who will walk beside you, will be there to answer any questions that you may have, doesn't necessarily have to tell you what you need to do or what the answers are, but is providing the support and the care and all of those things that's going to help an individual navigate through the caring, navigate through the emptiness that you would be struggling with through the interaction with a grief mentor.
Yeah, so this the sense of identity, because it's one of the four words for today's podcast. Identity is sort of that, who am I becoming separate from what I do? It's sort of, in one sense, it's a little bit of a background conversation you're having with yourself, right? And that's where these issues might pop up, because it's really coming to understand what's behind the roles, what's behind the titles, what's behind the accomplishments, right? Is really figuring out who you are. Now, when you've done your mentoring around the sense of grief and knowing that this identity is something going on in the background, how do you connect that grief story with what's happening in behind with identity? Do you have an example of someone you may have interacted with in this way? Because I want to make it real, and so that we can sort of say, okay, well, maybe here's an action outcome you can take.
I think, I guess my best way to describe that is that I've worked with a number of different people who were going through grieving the loss of family members, the loss of children, the loss of a job, for example. And all of those elements, what's missing is the fact that there's nobody to help them navigate past the next step and understanding what is the next step. And so you want to be able to, as a grief mentor, listen and hear what the individual is actually saying, and then just to be able to walk beside them to provide them with the comfort, the care, the understanding that I'm here for you. You don't need to run in the opposite direction. I'm actually here. A good example is you go to a funeral service where they've gone ahead and had the service and all that sort of stuff. And what I observed was that once the funeral is over, everybody disperses in different directions, but nobody is there to provide that ongoing support for individuals who have lost that loved one. And they become extremely emotional, they become sad because they have no idea of where they're going to go and how they're going to get there.
Yeah. So your own work, like you've written 2 books.
Yeah.
You have a third on the way.
I have 3 books written and I have a 4th on. Yeah.
Okay. He's a little more into it than I remember. So thank you, Doug. I always forget about the first one.
The gift of mentoring. Yeah.
For whatever reason. Okay.
Yeah.
But your last forays into the writing and publishing, it's about grief. True?
Correct.
And you went through your own grief example. So you almost self-mentored yourself, but yet you got some help to walk with some of that. You want to just share the story that's in your books about why you really got into grief and why it really matters to you?
So, excuse me. So You Are Not Alone, which was book number 2, was primarily written to help individuals that are dealing with post-traumatic stress. And I had personal experience as a result of my having served in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, experiencing lots of trauma or traumatic events, and ending up with post-traumatic stress and having to figure out what are my coping mechanisms and all that stuff to go through all of that. Fast forward to book number 3, Grief, the Silent Pandemic. It was written primarily to focus on individuals who had lost someone or something and that they were going through a significant amount of grief as a result of that. So, and my personal experience was I lost my wife, Deborah, to cancer in 2021. And so I have been personally dealing with her loss and trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to move past that? Or do I even think about moving past it? What are, just going through and asking myself the questions. The big thing that I found was that I need, and this is me personally, I need to have somebody that I can say I need help and that I can reach out to that person or persons and say I need that help and have them there to be able to do that, provide the help and the shoulder to cry on, for lack of a better choice of words.
So I'm just playing up and just bringing this sense of identity and mentoring together through personal experience. So there is an identity of a Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer. There is a husband who lost the wife. There are, well, what do I do with all of this? And, oh, hang on a minute, I was a writer. Oh, I could continue to be a writer. There are identities in you, but I think you actually said to me you wanted to self-identify as a Legacent, didn't you?
I did.
Because I placed that offer out there because I'm not saying come in and become certified as a Legacent. It's a self-identification, and you looked at what you were doing and knowing mentoring is important as part of the Legacent. You wrote me a note and said, hey, I think I'm a Legacent. And I said, if you think you are, let's go for it. And why is it that you think you're a Legacent? In other words, being a legacy and understand legacy and sharing it.
Well, part of it is I saw the close proximity between mentoring and a Legacent. And I saw that the Legacent piece, that if I was able to get myself to a place where I could see the correlation between it and mentoring, that it was going to help me in carrying my legacy forward, to be able to sort of have a better understanding of that as well.
So with your writing, there's an impact.
Correct.
With your grief mentoring, when you interact with someone, there's an impact.
Correct.
So this sense of identity, mentoring, and impact that I wanted to share on this first episode is Doug is living proof.
Yeah, you could go with that.
That this is what we're attempting to get to. And that's why Doug and I have this co-legacy project called the International Mentoring Community. And the being able to pick this up, because while I'm bringing forth the story of Legacent and how that unfolds in all different ways and shapes and forms, Doug is picking up on, well, here's a really good example. He's really wanting to front up grief mentors and find a way to get more grief mentors out there without crossing the line. And both Doug and I have had this conversation, without crossing the line into something called counseling. Yeah. And so that's why I wanted to have Doug on the first podcast, is that he's a really great example. And aside from, yeah, we have a co-legacy project called the International Mentoring Community, but yet he's living it. He's a great example. And that's where over time, I'm really hoping that as someone who's listening into the podcast, maybe you may want to come on board and share a little bit about what's happening for you. And it could be around identity, mentoring, impact. It could be another combination of words, because each broadcast, I'm going to choose 3 words out of my matrix that I have, and I'll explain that another day as well. And find a way for you to get involved with what's happening, because I would really like to establish a community. And I know Doug is really in a sense of community, and we both love to be able to get mentoring, grief mentoring, the sense of mentoring with Legacent up and really going and moving forward. Anything you want to add about that, Doug? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's something I certainly appreciate about you hanging around, even though I asked to take a little break from it.
The big thing for me is that everything has a story, and behind each story is a legacy that needs to have the support in order to be able to move it forward. But it's driven by the lived experience, the story that each and every one of us has. When I look at the journey I'm on, there's a number of different things that have taken place that I would suggest are legacy or Legacent focused, or certainly that's the outcome that I'm anticipating that I'm going to be a part of.
Yeah. And it's actually gotten to the point that I'm going to share something here with everyone. So Doug is just going to go into the background just a little bit, because I want to share something. He knows about this, okay? But I think it's worth us just acknowledging here. So I'll be right back, Doug, okay?
I'll be.
Doug actually was awarded fellow with the International Mentoring Community. And you might go, hang on a minute, isn't he the co-creator and all that? Yes. But I also said to Doug, if he wants to go through everything, he would have to go through it in the same way as anyone else. And he would have to pay because of the verification system that we have. And he said, sure. And what took place is he actually got to the point of being awarded the fellow. And I think it's a great recognition given to someone who has this wonderful tracking of a mentoring story. And congratulations, Doug. in getting it.
Thank you.
And I want to give that brief explanation because we truly decided that it wasn't going to be, oh, guy, here you go, 3 touches of the sword to the shoulder, thanks very much. You actually had to go through the verification. So just to put things in perspective, he went through a verification to get certified as a journey mentor. Then he went through a recertification, and with that, he was able to then apply for the fellow and went through the verification and becoming a fellow. So getting the fellow was actually over the course of 6 years. So it's not like, oh, okay, well, you did a couple of months. Great, thanks. So I wanted to share that with you, not to go, oh my goodness, what did he have to do? It was really about him understanding, being in practice, truly appreciating his identity, looking at his impact. Now, he may not have used those words of identity and impact linked to mentoring. I appreciate that. That's why I'm bringing it out in this podcast. But I think it's important to acknowledge that he went through what you could go through. And I'm not saying you may want to go all the way to fellow, but you may want to be certified as a journey mentor with the international mentoring community. You may want to go through the certification, not necessarily dive into fellow. Yeah, okay. But I think it's a journey worth taking, is it not, Doug?
Definitely. Yes, most definitely.
Yeah, because you brought it forward to us and we extended it. So I added this whole verification, certification, prior learning assessment, current learning assessment, really looking at what it means to have a conversation about verifying what you know you can do, the attitudes that go with it, and all that. And if you want to learn more about the mentoring, there'll be a link down below in the description that'll take you over to the mentoring page on the website, and you can look at it. And if you're interested, it's a very quick startup. It's just grab and download the profile for Journey Mentor and go through the quick self-assessment and then book a chat with Doug. That's how you get started. It's not complicated, but the beauty is just by doing the self-assessment, you can really check and balance where you are around mentoring. And then we've got resources that can help, and Doug would be able to give you what he would do next. And having gone through all of what he has gone through, you're talking to a great person who's got some really great insights. So again, congratulations on reaching the fellow. And let's see what the future brings around more of what that's about. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, though.
Oh, you're welcome. Is there anything you want to add to that at this point?
The only thing I would add to it is that the fellow designation is part of my legacy going forward, and ultimately it's one of the outcomes that I was searching for.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, because you can still be curious. And if you want to get some kind of certification, sometimes curiosity just leads you into wonder and wonderment and enjoying it from that perspective. But maybe you want a certification, and we have one. There are lots of other certifications out there. And if that's part of your journey, go for it and enjoy it and see what takes place for you. Okay. Now, I just want to have a quick sense of what impact is about, because we've hinted at it here, but I just want to take a little bit more granular look at the word impact. And what I'm attempting to get at here is impact is really about still moving forward with what it is that you would like to share. And keep developing your identity and just enjoying what's going on. But you're doing it in such a way as that you're encouraging others, assisting others in their journey. And that's why a Legacent is important, because while you're doing your own legacy, you're also supporting others in their legacy pursuits. And there's impact because of who you are, but there's also the impact that you're doing with the person you're encouraging. And as Doug mentioned, mentoring is one of the great ways of doing it from an educational approach. Not to say you couldn't do coaching or facilitating, all that, those are others. But if you want a really great bridge, mentoring is what you pick up on to get that impact going. But I think the important part of this whole story of impact, I hinted at it earlier, is the impact is there is because you decided to show up. There is so many persons that I've been interacting with over the last little bit. I don't know if I want to show. I don't want no. And they're sort of shrinking away, and I'm going, why would you want to decline? Why not grow and really enjoy the sharing of your wisdom? It's not that you have to, do another 9 to 5 in your 70s, okay? But what is it you could do that could impact? And I'm in my early 70s now, and I've chosen to support a couple of projects. One is a really big international project. Another one is a countrywide project in another continent. And then I'm doing some other bits and pieces of work, the international mentoring community. But I'm not doing it so that I'm tiring myself out. I'm doing it so that I can continue to experience living this life, experiencing the legacy that I intend to leave. Not look at it as something that's happening later on. I'm actually doing it, living it, feeling the impact of what I'm sharing. And that's why Doug and I have agreed, okay, it's time to revamp and really get this international mentoring community up and going, because there's a lot of persons who been poking us again. Where'd it go? What's going on? Let's bring it forward. So we said, okay, we'll do a little revitalization and see what happens. And so I think that's getting us close to closing down on this podcast, Doug. I have a little wrap up that I would like to do, and I just want to share, first off, is that there is something called the Legacent, which is a magazine that is available. And with that, you can read about ideas linked to Legacent. And it's on the website, and I'll drop the link. It comes out on the full moon. There's actually 10 issues, even though you'll see issue 9 here. There was an inaugural issue, so 10 issues have gone up so far. So we've almost got 13 issues will eventually be written within a year span, right? Because the full moon, there's 13 full moons in what we call a year. So I just wanted to acknowledge that the Legacent magazine is there. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing is diving a little bit deeper into that on another podcast, because I think there's something there, because I'd be inviting persons who like writing. If you have something, there are a couple of magazines that I'm working on, and maybe you want to drop something into that. So the Legacent magazine is there. And I think what I'm going to do, Doug, is I'm going to take us out, okay? And so big thank you from all the listeners. Big thank you from me for joining and sharing this sort of storyline of identity, mentoring, and impact. But is there anything, or do you want to give your own particular website link? You can put that out right now if you want, or or if you want to just close off some words before I take us out.
So my website is www.talentc, so the word talent, letter C on the end, .ca, and it's part of the legacy initiative that we're moving forward with as well. And so with that, back to you.
Okay, well, thanks. And we'll catch up to you a little bit later. So for everyone, I just wanted to share is that becoming a Legacent starts with 3 words. Well, on today's podcast, maybe you might like some of the other 3-word combinations I'll be sharing over other times that we'll be meeting on the podcast. Identity, mentoring, and impact. Identity. Who are you beneath what you do? Mentoring. Who you walk alongside and who once walked with you. Understanding that is important. Impact. What's still moving because you showed up? 3 words, 1 becoming. Becoming a Legacent. I hope you join us on new issues, issues of Legacent, and that you join the podcast. It will be on Saturdays, 10 a.m. Mountain, and certainly join us. I didn't notice any questions came in on the chat, so we'll catch up. If you have any comments or questions, drop them down in the comments section down below the video. All the links will be down there for you. And with that, as I always bring to a close, as always and in always, take care.